What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, Mundungus Creevy, alongside my co-hosts, as always, Karen Parker, Gage Madrid, Glenn Hauser. How's it going, guys?
What's up?
Yo.
Just
how about them
start the
Chiefs?
intro while I cut you off. That's what we do.
That's all right.
Absolute booty cheeks.
God, and seeing it now, my hair looks terrible in that clip. Like, absolutely terrible.
That's what we're focusing on?
Yeah. His hair looks like absolute booty cheeks.
It does.
Absolute
The
booty
video accurately describes my hair.
So what I was going to say is
Gage
what I
has
like.
a glorious head of hair, and I can say that, as somebody who does not. So I can understand why that's important to him when he's saying absolute booty cheeks.
Well, so what I like about the clip is that because he's got the green screen behind him, you have no idea when that clip happened. So like we could play that at any moment during our show, and Gage actually could be saying that like actually in this show, and and it may not necessarily be a previous clip. So that's the cool part about it.
True.
Yep. So obviously the big news coming out of this week, the Chiefs repeat as Super Bowl champions, beat the 49ers in overtime. I don't want to dwell on it too much because frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. I will say this, though. I think that the 49ers lost it more than the Chiefs won it. I think there were more mistakes on the 49ers side, and I think that out of the defensive battle between the two teams, Chris Jones was able to show up at the right time where Nick Bosa was not able to. I
mean, well, in the beginning of the game, Nick Bosa, Randy Gregory, and Chase Young were all over the place. Like they were all over the place. And actually, I think your point is valid. I will say though, I think the injury of Greenlaw really took the wind out of the sails of the 49ers in that game. When he went down, it's like the energy of that 49ers sideline, or I should say the defensive sideline, it's like they just went dormant. Like it was quiet. I mean, like it was, and I think that's just the unfortunate thing. We're talking a Super Bowl, like a Super Bowl where a guy is amped up on a sideline and he's running out to get onto the field. And it's just an unfortunate situation where a non-contact injury happens as he's like running, to get into the huddle. It's just such a, you're just gutted for the guy. And, and the fact it's an Achilles, it's like, it isn't, and it isn't also like so much the fact that like the injury of just that Super Bowl, it happened in February and it's an Achilles injury. So who knows what his recovery is going to end up being like, even within this next season that's upcoming here soon, and especially training camp. So it's just like, you're just absolutely gutted for Greenlaw.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's one of those fluky deals where he just takes a bad step and goes down, and it's just you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it's a really crappy situation. And I think it almost is a microcosm of the entire day for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, it was one of those things too. It's not is he goes down in a heap as they're running to take the field, and the defense had been playing well. And all of a sudden now his teammates are stopping and addressing his injury. 5 minutes later, or not even 5 minutes later, a cart is coming out to pick him up off the sideline. So you mean to tell me that that's not, the guys on the field are not paying attention or being distracted by one of their leaders being carted off at that moment? It really hurt them. And also like George Kittle getting hurt and being out for a while and heading into the locker room. I mean, I think that had some impact as well, but you can't overcome these types of mistakes where you're make that fumble, that Ray McLeod, like I know he was trying to make a play based on the fact that his teammate got hit with the ball, but like run up there and catch the ball, like don't even allow that to happen or manage the field a little bit better. It was truly unfortunate because I think 100% of Broncos country was rooting for the Niners in that game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And one of the other big things coming out of the press conferences after the game is that apparently, and I don't know if this is true or not, maybe it's just people picking up on stuff, the 49ers not knowing overtime rules. There's no way that can be a thing, right? Like they have to know the overtime rules.
Kyle Juszczyk didn't know.
I don't know. I mean, I don't want to use the Greenlaw situation to everything that Glenn described as an excuse, but like when the emotions are getting the best of you and you're so immersed into the actual game itself, I think we also have to remember that they're human, and we forget things, and so and especially in the vein of the Super Bowl also being wrapped up into the said current season, right? Which is the 2023 and then into 2024. I think it's at least fair, to make, the case that possibly they didn't know. And I think it's, I think it's understandable why people would criticize the 49ers and saying like, hey, what are they doing? Not actually noticing the fact about these new, rule changes and everything that came through. But like, I think given everything and the emotions and everything that had just gone on in that game, I can understand why they did not know the rules.
So it's one of those things for me. It's if the coaches didn't know the rules, that would be a bigger part. If the players didn't, the coaches are managing what's going to happen, and quite honestly, I can see why Kyle wanted to control the game a little bit more. I think what he didn't realize or didn't consider was perhaps the Chiefs were already planning a week ago to go for 2 should they score that tying touchdown. So there was not going to be a third possession regardless. But I think people are reading a lot more into it. I am surprised the players are admitting that they were unfamiliar with it. But if they said that the coaches didn't know what they were talking about, that would be a bigger story for me.
Well, what that tells me is that wasn't stressed over and over again in situational football meetings.
Yeah.
Whereas the Kansas City Chiefs said that, like multiple Chiefs players said that they had these meetings where they were stressing to them, okay, if this situation comes up, this is what's going to happen. If there was even an ounce of gray area there for the 49ers, that tells me that they weren't prepared for this situation to happen.
Yeah.
And that at the end of the day is on coaching.
Yeah.
See, and for me, like I agree with taking the ball first in overtime. Like Sports Nonsense says take the ball second. I would rather have it first, especially having Patrick Mahomes on the other sideline. People were saying, oh, well, why would you give him the chance to end the game on a touchdown? If you take the ball first, you have the opportunity to end the game without letting Mahomes go on the field. So I agree with them taking the ball first.
In the regular season you do, but not in the postseason. If the 49ers took the ball first.
See, I don't even know the rules.
Yeah, if the 49ers took the ball first, then Mahomes was always going to get that second possession. What would have happened if the 49ers had deferred essentially is they would have known on that second possession if they needed to get a touchdown or if they needed to get a field goal. In all likelihood, we all know they would have needed a touchdown to match it. Even if Kansas City had gone for even if Kansas City had gone for 2 on that first one, they still would have had an opportunity to repossess, and they would have gone for 2, the 49ers. It would have tied it. KC would have got it for a third possession. Then they get it and win it.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I think we also have to talk about obviously the big elephant in the room. We touched a little bit about the coaching, issues possibly, and as it correlates to overtime. But we've now entered the 3rd time with Kyle Shanahan blowing a lead. And of all things, blowing a 10-point lead to the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, we should phrase it this way. I mean, it does not take away from the fact that Kyle Shanahan is a great coach, because we know Kyle Shanahan is a great coach, and there are a handful of coaches that would kill to be in the Super Bowl, right? that would just absolutely kill to be in the Super Bowl. I just think that over the course of how he's been coaching, it's just been a very rough go of, how he's gone about it. Now, I will admit that Brock Purdy actually had a great Super Bowl. He actually played quite well in that Super Bowl. Frankly, I think he did rather go toe-to-toe with Patrick Mahomes, quarterback to quarterback. I just think that despite the fact that there were times, say, the running game wasn't working, he probably could have stayed with it just a little bit more, and I think that for Shannon, especially, what is it, even into that overtime, you gave it was a pass play, and it was a smart play by Purdy, but I mean, you had Christian McCaffrey, out there in the open, and he was doing work. Like, he was also doing work again in the running game on that, on that overtime drive, and you just don't, give him the ball, and especially also given everything that we saw with Chris Jones, I mean, like, it's just better to possibly, neutralize that with either those short passes or even running the football. So, and Kyle Shanahan just didn't do that, and it's pretty clear he did not learn from his mistakes at all.
Yep.
Yeah. And this is actually the next point I was going to bring up, and the last one I want to cover on the Super Bowl, because screw the Chiefs. I don't want to talk about them anymore. Why in the blue hell was Elway bringing the Lombardi trophy to the Chiefs?
I think now that I'm removed emotionally from the situation, had San Francisco won, the entire city of Denver would have been losing their mind, because John Elway would have been handing John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan the Lombardi trophy. So that was something prearranged, no matter who was going to win. I get that now.
Yeah.
What's up, Bill?
Hey, Bill.
But it hurts because there was always that chance that John Elway was going to have to hand a Lombardi trophy to the Kansas City Chiefs. And unfortunately, that's what ended up happening, breaking the entire collective hearts of Broncos country.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that he was on a scooter was absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know what into it, but it was pretty obvious that it was scripted. Like that, that this was something that they had scripted beforehand. Probably, and you said it, Gage, like John Elway was always going to probably handing out that trophy. It's just such a sucker punch when it's the Chiefs that you're handing the Super Bowl trophy over to. It's just like, I mean, if it's just it's a series of unfortunate events, really. And it's just so unfortunate that that's exactly what, happened. And that's going to end up being memed one more time again for John Elway on social media for many, many years to come.
If there's any consolation prize for us, it's that the Raiders also got dirt rubbed in their face because it was their ex-Bay Area rival and their division rival, and their division rival wins a Super Bowl in their stadium.
In their locker room.
Their locker room, yeah.
But which one was worse, though? Elway handing it to the Chiefs or Elway handing it to the Niners with Kyle Shanahan, the coach that he could have gotten, but did not?
No, I'd much rather that.
It still would have been, especially given all the Broncos ties, too. It's really easy to soften the blow of everything. In fact, who knows? John Elway, when he's actually handing him the Super Bowl trophy, had they won, probably would have said in his ear, I really wish I would have hired you. Or maybe he would have actually said, blame Joe Ellis, not me.
All right, so this one's for Joe. So I think what we're gonna get into some Bronco stuff, and we do have some things to cover because now it is officially the off season, and we have some things we need to talk about. Most importantly, the quarterback. But before we go into that, we need to lead into that with what the Broncos' potential salary cap could look like because of where we sit right now. So based on a video that Gage released on the Syndicate channel, which is tagged in the description, go check that out, please. It is amazing. We're going to show the numbers here on screen, let Gage go through it, and then we'll kind of go through some options at quarterback that we think could work for the Broncos.
Get your popcorn
Gage,
ready.
it's all you, my friend.
All right. So the Denver Broncos are in a little bit of a salary cap situation right now. especially if they cut Russell Wilson. Right now, if we take a look at this lovely number, the Denver Broncos are in the red $31.3 million. So they're going to have to do some work just to get back up and cap compliant. Then, if they cut Russell Wilson and do what is assumed they're going to do and designate him as a post-June 1st release, they're going to take on an additional $35 million in dead money this season from that release. We cannot have that scenario, well, we're going to have that scenario play out, but we're going to have to find ways to alleviate losing all of that money. Essentially, we're going to have to, first of all, come up with the $31.3 million to get back up cap compliant so we're not penalized for being above the cap. And then we're going to have to come up with the $35 million for Russell Wilson is dead money this year. And there's several ways that we can come up with this money. And that includes, okay, cool. I can highlight it on my end and it'll show up there. Awesome. Mm-hmm. So the first way we can do it is through restructuring deals on some veteran guys. And when you restructure a contract, I know we've explained it before here on the channel, you're essentially borrowing money from future seasons of salary cap. You're giving these guys this money right away in the form of a signing bonus, and they can then spread that signing bonus throughout future years on the salary cap. So it's essentially almost like having a credit card. The Broncos can restructure these 5 players, Mike McGlinchey freeing up $10.4 million, Zach Allen freeing up $9.4 million, Cortland Sutton freeing up $6 million, Ben Powers freeing up $7.3 million, and then Alex Singleton freeing up $2.2 million. That will create $35.3 million in salary cap savings. So that's basically the $35 million that you need to alleviate the Russell Wilson money. Then another way that you can alleviate cap, at least in short term, is via extensions. You can see here that I have 2 key veteran players, the 2 longest tenured players on the Denver Broncos roster, in Garrett Bowles and Justin Simmons. I feel like those are key pieces to have in our locker room, especially as we transition to sort of a youth movement. I still want to have some key veterans on the team. So by extending Garrett Bowles, they can free up $11.6 million in immediate salary cap. And then by extending Justin Simmons, they can free up $10.6 million in immediate salary cap for a total of $22.2 million. Then we move down here into trades. I think that the most likely trade candidate for the Denver Broncos at this point in time is going to be Jerry Jeudy. If they move on from him, they will save just south of $13 million. I did round up most of these figures just for simplicity's sake. They'll save just south of $13 million plus recoup a draft pick. I'm thinking somewhere around a 4th round pick for Jerry Jeudy. That's probably the best scenario there. So $13 million in savings there. Then, unfortunately, we do have to move into some cuts. Those are going to be those tough emotional decisions that the Denver Broncos are going to have to make, but they can save a pretty significant amount of money if they make some of these cuts. The first one is Tim Patrick saving $9.5 million against the 2024 cap. I do think that Tim Patrick coming back on a vet minimum deal or something a little bit more north of that may be realistic, because if he's going to have to go down that route, why not come back to Denver and be a veteran mentor, especially if we lose 1 or 2 pieces in that wide receiver room. DJ Jones, $10 million. That's pretty much a no-brainer move for me. I strongly feel like the Denver Broncos will move on from DJ Jones. They're looking to rebuild their front 7, especially that interior defensive line. The only starting defender that I can see returning on the interior D line is going to be Zach Allen. Sorry, my grandma's Chihuahua is being dumb. Sorry about that.
Disagreed with DJ Jones.
Add them to the cut list. The Chihuahua's out.
Seriously, yeah, Chihuahua is out, man, and we're not even saving any money. We're taking a negative hit to get rid of the Chihuahua. All right. Jarrett Stidham saving $5 million. You will take a little bit of dead money with Stidham, but I do feel like if you're going to bring in Jameis Winston, Jarrett Stidham becomes expendable, saves the money, might as well think about it. Samaje Perine, $3 million. I don't necessarily think they make that move either, but it is something to think about if you really are trying to get younger and cheaper on your roster. Chris Manhertz, $2.1 million, kind of the same logic there. I don't know if he stays or goes, but $2.1 million is on the table there if he goes. Traywon Smith, who brought really good special teams play, I felt like, for the Denver Broncos, but at $2.5 million, he just might be a luxury that the Denver Broncos cannot afford. So that would be a pretty significant amount of savings there. Riley Dixon, 1.7 mil for a punter really isn't bad, but let's just say the Broncos get a rookie punter in here on a cheaper contract. You can save 1.7 mil right there. And then $1.1 million in savings for David Sills. I think that's another no-brainer. He was on the practice squad most of the year last year, special teams guy. So by making those cuts, they can save $34.9 million. In total, saving $105.4 mil. In 2024, obviously, they'll have the negative 31.3 mil to start off. That's estimated. The cap could go up. The cap is expected to go up. So we don't have an exact number, but this is what Spot Track currently has it as. Then Russell Wilson's dead money right here, $35.4 million. So after those moves, the Denver Broncos will be playing with about $38.7 million in available cap space. However, we do have in-house free agents that we have to consider re-signing. If you look at the numbers next to the player's name, if the number is in red, that means that I feel like the Denver Broncos will be moving on from that player. These numbers are the estimated average annual value in their new contract that these players will receive, be it through either Pro Football Focus or just my own guess. Like, for some reason, they didn't have PJ Locke in there as one of their top free agents available. So I just guessed $7 million based on other safeties of his same value that they're bringing to the team, kind of like Donovan Wilson of the Dallas Cowboys, somewhere of that level. So I anticipate maybe like a 3-year deal for PJ Locke, $21 million, $7 million annually. That's a move that the Denver Broncos, I strongly feel like, are going to want to get done because of how much he stabilized that position. Lloyd Cushenberry, PFF anticipates he's going to get $14.3 million annually on the open market. The Denver Broncos have already said that Alex Forsythe, they view him as a future starter at center. I strongly believe they're going to look to move on from Lloyd Cushenberry. Josie Jewell, it's kind of the same thing there with Drew Sanders, who George Payton said in his end-of-season press conference they view as a starting caliber player. He's going to have to step up at off-ball linebacker. It really feels that way because I don't think that the Denver Broncos are going to be able to re-sign Josie Jewell if he gets that anticipated $6.25 million according to Pro Football Focus. Will Lutz, $3.5 million. Again, that's a number I just kind of guessed on based on his previous contracts. I think that Sean Payton is very comfortable with Will Lutz as his kicker, and he's stabilized that situation for the Denver Broncos. So I think that they will keep Will Lutz on probably a multi-year deal. Mike Purcell, he's anticipated to get $3.5 million according to Pro Football Focus. I don't think that the Denver Broncos will be keeping Mike at that rate. Maybe if it's only like $1 million, certainly, but that's a little rich for my blood. Mike Purcell, awesome story, Denver native, been on the team since 2019, but I think it is time to move on there. K'Wan Williams, he's been forced out the door basically because Jaquan McMillan is now solidified as the Broncos starting nickel. So I foresee K'Wan Williams going on to greener pastures there. Cam Fleming at $2.5 million. That was a tough one for me to make that decision. It just kind of came down to finances at the end of the day. I do feel like the Denver Broncos could keep Cam Fleming, especially at that low of a cost, especially if they're looking to maybe move on from Garrett Bowles. He'd probably come back on a little bit more of a lucrative deal if that were the case. So I don't know, man. You can kind of put Cam Fleming in an either or category for me. Mike Burton, $1.3 million. Yeah, I think that makes complete total sense. A fullback is a critical part of the Sean Payton offense. I think moving on from Adam Troutman is the right move. He disappointed in quite a few aspects for me in that offense. So I'm moving on from Troutman. Fabian Moreau, who was obviously our starting boundary corner in the final part of the season or for most of the season. I don't think that the Broncos are going to keep Fabian Moreau. Jonathan Harris, I think he might return as like one of the only guys that they keep in-house on that defensive line outside of Zach $2 million, that makes sense. And then Justin Sternod, $1 million. I'm not going to keep Justin Sternod because it's going to be really easy for the Denver Broncos to bring back these restricted free agents and these exclusive rights free agents. They can tender these guys. They can match whatever offer that these guys get in free agency. So it's really easy to retain them all. So I have them bringing back Jonas Griffith and Quinn Bailey at $915K each. And then I have them bringing back Michael Bandy and Art Green $795K each. So that would be $17.3 million to re-sign everybody. So that would leave the Denver Broncos with about $21 million-ish to play with. And then you have to account for rookie deals too. I'm not exactly sure what the rookie reserve would be. I guesstimated $7-8 million. Cam, if you know the answer to that, please correct me. But I'm not 100% sure there. But so I'm guesstimating the Denver Broncos will have somewhere around 13, 14, 15 million dollars to bring in outside free agents.
And so the biggest reason why I wanted and asked for Gage to go through that is because I want the reality of the situation that we're in to kind of sink in. Like, this isn't a boom, we signed a bunch of people, we're going to go win the Super Bowl now. With the amount of cap space that we have right now, I think we're looking at like 2-3 years before we're able to go get the big money free agents or have the draft capital built up to be able to rebuild the team. So I think that moving on from Russell Wilson, we're now looking at free agents that are cheap or
Jeff's comments.
Free agents that are cheap or are still on the rookie deal or trading, something like that. So what I asked the guys to do was pick out a quarterback that they felt would be a good fit for the Broncos, and we'll kind of go over it. We'll discuss it and see what we think the best move might be. I'm going to start so that I can work on all this stuff while you guys are doing yours.
Mike, can I make a comment about Gage's
please do.
Which was awesome, by the way, and I'm sorry to interrupt before the next segment, but Gage, as you've really put this comprehensive presentation together, it's pretty impossible for the Broncos to even consider wiping out the entire Justin Simmons commitment this year. I mean, how would that even look when you were basing it on the spreading it over the 2 years? Some people are considering tearing off the Band-Aid and do it in over 1 year. That just seems impossible based on what we were seeing from your information.
Just to clarify, you meant Russell Wilson, right? You said Justin Simmons.
Oh, Russell Wilson. I'm sorry. Yes.
Either
absolutely.
or.
No, you're good. Yeah. At this rate, I just don't see how the Denver Broncos are going to be able to take all that medicine this year. I really don't, because that's going to put such a constraint on being able to re-sign in-house guys and even bring in cheap free agents. I think they're going to have to spread it. That's the only way they can approach this.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, let's dig into the quarterbacks that we think would be a good fit for the Broncos. Again, I'll start so I can handle all this stuff while you guys are talking. And I'm going to start with.
Hold on. With the fact that you are leading off first, it's probably appropriate you are leading off. Let's just be honest.
If I could throw something at you right now, straight up.
That would be so good if you could toss it.
Just something goes flying through.
all wasted animation.
Oh, but it's someone that has been going or getting some talking points on social media. And for me, it's Mac Jones. And one of the reasons that I say that is because there was an interview done with Sean Payton where they actually asked him about Mac Jones. And he said, when referring to Mac Jones, I think positive, really positive. He was someone that we were really high on. I think he processes information fast. At Alabama, if you watch his tape closely, the ball comes out, decisions are made fast. I think he sees the field horizontally as well as vertically. He has the arm to make the throws that you want. His decision-making and processing are where I felt were really strong, suits with him. straight from the quote.
Who writes your notes?
He does.
So
And I think he's handling it well. It's not easy to all of a sudden come in and start week one as a rookie, but he's a smart player. And one of the other reasons why I say that is because of the fact that you look at Mac Jones's rookie year. He makes the Pro Bowl. Obviously, the Pro Bowl isn't as big of a marker as it used to be. But he moves on from Josh McDaniels, who is a horrible head coach, but is a really good offensive coordinator, into offensive coordinator hell, I guess, at the Patriots. And then you see the fall off happen. And we, of all people, can understand having a bad offensive coordinator and a quarterback. So for me, I feel like if the Patriots are going to draft a quarterback at number 3, I think it would be worth Denver going after Mac Jones.
See, if the Broncos went out and actually brought in Mac Jones and signed Mac Jones, I would vomit, and I would actually eat that vomit. Like, it would be so bad if they
See, now I want the signing to happen more than ever.
Yeah, now that's.
I mean, I'm going to be
Positive
joining Cam in
reinforcement.
this one, so you'll get a 2-for-1 special there.
Well, because like the thing for me is like, I mean, we should preface this by saying that processing is the number one thing that is on Sean Payton's, card for a quarterback.
Timing, tempo, and rhythm. That's what Drew Brees said for a Sean Payton offense.
But processing is a big thing for Sean, like maybe the biggest thing for Sean. And Mac Jones, from what you said, he's a processor. I just think the thing that is a big turnoff for me is if Bill O'Brien couldn't make it work with Mac Jones, I'm all out on Mac Jones right now, because like the whole point of them even bringing Bill O'Brien in was for them to work with Mac Jones, and it failed miserably. And also too, like, even over the course of the years, obviously I know that the Patriots haven't been the same since TB12 has left the building, but Bill Belichick has been around the block quite a few years in handling offense and everything like that. So if he can't, make it work with guys like Cam Newton, who we know has been at the end of the hill ever since Super Bowl 50, and he can't even make it work with guys like, Mac Jones, who they actually drafted and invested in, I'm all out on it. Like, I'm absolutely all out on that.
I could not agree more, man. You could see Mac Jones. There were some signs of really bad attitude spewing out between his little sideline spew with Bill O'Brien there in Germany during the Colts game after I believe he threw a really ugly pick or something along. Yeah, it was a really god-awful pick off of his back shoulder. I remember it now very clearly. And I have another
game at that point.
Yep. And I have another one that's etched in my memory too. Almost a similar kind of throw. He throws it off his back foot late across the grain to the left sideline against the Dallas Cowboys. And it was one of DeRon Bland's pick sixes that he had this year. Mm-hmm. I cannot ride with that. Between attitude, between that and just bad decision-making, poor fundamentals that regressed. Mac Jones was known for having pretty solid mechanics in his rookie year. That completely tapered off this past season. I saw this man throwing off of his back foot, not stepping into throws, terrible footwork. It's basic stuff that Mac Jones isn't getting correct. And if he can't make things work with Bill Belichick, what on earth makes you think it's going to work under Sean Payton?
See, my biggest thing with him is really the attitude. I think he's such a prick, but he's prick to his teammates too. I think that's a real problem. In fairness to Mac, his second offensive coordinator of his career was Matt Patricia and Joe. They were co-coordinators, Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. Defensive coordinator and a special teams coach were his offensive coordinator the year after he made the Pro Bowl. And then this year, they bring in O'Brien, trying to get that band back together. and they treated the quarterback situation in New England very much like Atlanta did. Like the leash was very short, and so it's hard when you're deemed the starter and then you keep getting pulled. I know why he got pulled. The decisions were very poor, but I don't know. I feel like there are better options than Mac Jones, and really it's we don't need the culture to take a step backwards for a guy who's probably not going to be our long-term solution.
Yeah.
Okay, who's next?
Why don't you actually go ahead and Glenn and say who your guy is?
All right, so my guy is a little bit different because I don't know the likelihood that he will be available because he's such a good deal, and that's Jake Browning, the backup quarterback of the Cincinnati Bengals. 6'2", 209, played for Boggins' team, the University of Washington. He's an interesting prospect. He'll be 28 in April, but it seems like he's a young guy because he hasn't played much. But he came into the league as an undrafted free agent for the Vikings. Only made $750,000 this past season, and was worth his weight in gold as far as I'm concerned for the Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow going out. Browning started 7 games, was 4-3 in those starts. But some of the other statistics did kind of stick out for me. He has 70.4% completion percentage, just short of 2,000 yards in those 7 games. He did have 12 touchdowns, quarterback rating of 98.4. But the thing is, he is an exclusive rights free agent. So Cincinnati can keep him if they want, and all they have to pay him is $915,000 this year. And so that's why I think that it's very unlikely that they'll relinquish his his position in AJ McCarron would be then the backup to Joe Burrow. Spot Track called him one of the best values in the NFL. It was interesting. The Bengals, you think about how it looked like they were really in rough shape, especially after losing a franchise quarterback. They ended up 9-8. And some of the strong games that I want to point out for Browning at Jacksonville, 34-31 in OT, 354 yards with a win. Indianapolis, he won a 34-14, 275 yards passing. Minnesota, a 27-24 overtime win, 324 yards. He won the final game of Cleveland against Cleveland, 34-14. He only had 156 yards passing, but it allowed the Bengals to finish 9-8. Where he did fall short, and is that they lost 2 games with him as a starter against Pittsburgh, and that kept them out of the playoffs. Pittsburgh ended up 10-7. They ended up 9-8. Cleveland was 11-6. They really could have had a playoff spot had they won those 2 winnable games against a division rival. But I really like him from a standpoint of like what I saw from the guy is he was a fighter, he was a leader, he didn't look shaken out there at all. And if somehow the Broncos were able to pluck him from the Bengals for a nominal draft choice, because I'm sure they're going to bring him back, I say it's something worth looking into.
Actually, I was going to say, with it being an exclusive rights free agent, I feel like they would have to pull that exclusive rights off or something like it, because we know that like if it's an exclusive rights free agent, they would almost have to. It's almost like a restricted free agent and and almost like exclusive. I think they would almost have to pull that off of him, if you will, and then make him available, right? Because that's kind of like how the exclusive rights free agents work. Is like you're almost guaranteed to be back with your team, maybe, except for possibly trading for him. So yeah. I'm really, I'm curious about it. But I feel like we also would have to consider too, he had nothing to lose. Browning had nothing to lose being in those games. And when you have nothing to lose and you have nothing, really to prove, if you will, except go in, in basically some really tough situations, if you will, and kind of keep the team, at least a semblance of a good football team. I mean, I think, frankly, for me, this is not a knock on Jake Browning because he did play really well with the Bengals down that stretch. For me, I felt like that was more of a product with Brian Callahan and even Zach Taylor for how they were able to work with Browning to get him prepared week in and week out. And so I think, and also too, I think for Browning, if he is a Bronco, like say he is the quarterback here, how long would a leash be for a guy like that, right? Because that's the other part of this conversation is if we're talking about a vet person that's going to be coming into the building, a guy like Jake Browning, how long would that leash be for a guy like that?
Mm-hmm. But I think it's worth bringing up Travis's comment again, Mike, if you could.
Yeah.
He said, don't be a prisoner of the moment. Browning's a backup, period. We see this all the time. Forget those washed up jocks and go draft a young stud. Keep Russ to mentor. That's how you do it. And listen, when we're going through this exercise, it doesn't mean we don't necessarily want to draft a rookie quarterback. It's just what's the solution in the interim, in depending on how long it takes to get that rookie ready to go in. Keeping Russ as a mentor, there's reports even as recent as last weekend that it's the Broncos are still looking as a possibility. But Ian Rappaport is even saying, and he was part of that Pelissero report, that it's highly unlikely. It just looks like things are going to move on and split. So having Russ as the mentor, I don't know if that's a possibility. So that's why we're looking at some of these other options. But I'm in favor of definitely drafting one of these young studs for sure. This is all under the assumption that we're going to be drafting a quarterback at 12 or wherever we're at in the first round. But the reason why I wanted to go through this is because if we don't have Russ and we don't stick with Stidham and we draft a rookie, our salary cap is limited. So if we're bringing in a veteran, right? If we're bringing in a vet, we need to bring in a vet that we can afford. That's the right fit. That's why we're doing this. So that's Jake Browning. That's Mac Jones. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. Or Cam. Go, Cam. Go.
All right. So I am going to revolt against the possibility of possibly, this idea of a quarterback possibly being on the move, if you will. And so I'm under the assumption, let's just roll with this. I'm under the assumption that Jarrett Stidham will still maintain being a Denver Bronco.
Okay.
I am still under the impression that Jarrett Stidham will still maintain being a Bronco because I feel like Sean Payton himself had hindsight coming in. And we've said this numerous times a little bit before, is that Sean Payton handpicked the Broncos organization, not Russell Wilson, right? We've said that on numerous occasions. And so I feel like maybe him bringing Jarrett Stidham and signing him to what we were surprised with, that length of a deal, in that contract, I think he was planning ahead for him to possibly be here and start a few games, possibly here in 2024. However, I think what would be really wise in this scenario is, and by the way, in this scenario, they move on from Ben DiNucci, not just yet, but they move on from Ben DiNucci come week one. But I think that if the option presents itself to have a low risk, possibly high reward, possible fit for the system that maybe Sean Payton would like to have, and have him be integrated, I think Sam Darnold would be a fantastic option for Sean Payton. I mean, he's only 26 years old. He's already been integrated with the Shanahan system, right? And he kind of was able to at least play in a pinch, right? He was able to play in a pinch. And also, too, like the fact that you still have Stidham on the roster, you still have possibly Sam Darnold on the roster, it doesn't necessarily take you out of that conversation of possibly even getting a quarterback in the draft. And I think that just the idea that, we possibly spend a little bit too much time on, possibly bringing the Jacoby Brissetts in of the world, or possibly like a Jameis Winston, who I think is a logical option in his own right. A guy like a Jameis Winston, I feel like having a young guy, right, kind of to a certain extent with what he had with Purdy, having a 26-year-old in the building with a younger quarterback that they will draft, whether that's a Michael Pratt, guy they drafted in 12, whoever, I feel like would be really, really beneficial for that room.
Sure. I'm glad that you mentioned Jameis Winston, and I think that's a good transition into who I have is Jameis Winston, because he knows Sean Payton. Sean Payton knows him, and they've had success together prior to Jameis going down with that injury in 2021. I think that if we do look to move on from Jarrett Stidham and look to upgrade, Jameis Winston is almost a no-brainer. I don't see a scenario where he's back in New Orleans this year. I think Jameis is trying to look for an opportunity to start, and he might get that opportunity here in Denver. I absolutely think that makes a ton of sense. Seeing Cam's point, too, about having a young guy in the building to bridge to a rookie, I could see a scenario where Jarrett Stidham's here, Jameis Winston is here, and the young rookies here. Like, I could see that as a three-man quarterback room and basically have Jarrett Stidham serve as your expensive emergency third-string quarterback, while Jameis Winston either is starting or serves as your backup to your rookie. So for me, they had a winning record together, and Jameis Winston was doing something that he's not really known for doing, and he was taking care of the football and making clean, sound decisions with Sean Payton. He was executing that Sean Payton offense with precision, timing, and accuracy, just like Drew Brees said. And it felt like Jameis has been sort of fed to the wolves the last couple of years in New Orleans. You ask me, I feel like Jameis Winston would have been a better quarterback option for the New Orleans Saints at various points last year than the clearly injured Derek Carr. And for whatever given reason, they didn't want to trot him out there. So maybe Pete Carmichael coming over here would deter Jameis Winston from coming to Denver because of the kind of cold-shouldered treatment he got in those last couple of seasons in New Orleans. But when Sean Payton was there, he very clearly took a liking to Jameis Winston. And we all know it's not Pete Carmichael calling the shots here in Denver. It's Sean Payton.
Yep. So let me ask, Glenn, I think you're muted.
You're still.
I was going to ask, all right, your guys' scenario, like, what do you think each of your quarterbacks would cost the Broncos?
I mean, the good news, I feel like, even for Sam Darnold, is he's cheap. Like, I mean, you're not talking a Sam Darnold, or I mean, you're not talking a Jarrett Stidham contract, so I mean, you could possibly, even sign him for, $3 million, $4 million, like, something really cheap, even like possibly like a 1 year, $2 million deal, if you will. And quarterbacks have done that before, right? So, I mean, you can sign him for very, very cheap.
Yep. I totally agree. Glenn?
Well, my guy is at 915. So he'd be in the $1 million range.
Okay.
Max at about 2.8, but he's got that fifth-year option. But that fifth-year option,
Mac would actually be something probably along the lines of maybe like 450,000. Probably is what I would sign him for.
Wow.
I
don't want your guy either. You shit on mine, I shit on yours. I don't want your guy neither.
My guy was actually cheaper than Jarrett Stidham last year. He signed a 1 year, $4 million deal with New Orleans last year, 2.835 signing bonus. I think that he could get a pretty comparable deal here in Denver. Maybe give him the Jarrett Stidham deal, the 2 years, $10 million. I could totally see that.
And he runs a victory offense like clockwork. I mean, it's
yeah.
Just watch out for those crab legs.
Oh yeah. So everybody in the chat, we just went through the four quarterbacks: Mac Jones, Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold, Jake Browning. Let us know in the comments which one of those four you would rather have. Obviously, this is excluding Stidham. This is excluding any rookie that we get. These are just the four options that we came up with. Yeah. There's obviously more, but these are the four that we like. So go ahead and let us know which quarterback you would prefer on the Broncos next season. And with that, let's kind of go into, holy crap, that's a big – we have leverage on those. Actually, we don't have a cut. We don't have to cut him because we have to pay the salary either way. So make a play. Sam Darnold is a bust. Do y'all want to win? In what world does Sam Darnold, Jameis compete with Mahomes? Russ has proven he can not only compete, but beat KC. We have to beat KC. And none of the guys you are mentioning can do it. Y'all are crazy, man. Russ even said he wanted to stay. I bet Russ is the starter week 1 of 24. I bet he's not.
I just feel like damage has been done. Like
Yeah.
the damage is done.
Oh, so this is my thing, right? And we've talked about this weeks over weeks over weeks. Like Russ and Payton are not a good fit. They're not.
No.
Russell Wilson is not the same Russell Wilson that we had in Seattle, right? And maybe the last 2 years in Seattle, but like 3-4 years before that, it's not the same Russ. Like, I don't hate Russ. I was a huge fan of the trade. None of us hate Russ.
Nope.
No.
But the fact of the matter is, Payton and Russ don't fit together offensively, role-wise, as far as what a quarterback does. It just doesn't work. It's kind of the same thing with Russell Wilson and Jerry Jeudy. Like, the style of quarterback that Russ is with the style of receiver that Jeudy is, it doesn't really mesh very well.
Yeah.
Judy's very precise. Russ is not. Russ and Cortland work, right? Like Court and Russ are the perfect pairing.
Yeah.
But also, it was apparent just even in right off the bat after Payton was hired, he's insulting Russ's character and the kissing babies comment and things like that. It was a weird start to the relationship, and I'm tired of Sean continuously saying, let's, Russ and I have a great relationship. Well, we all know that that's not true. And Browning, we also, as you're voting, just remember, the girlfriend in the bodysuit in the suite at that last game, she'd look good in the orange. So if that helps my case with the votes, I'll take it. So
yeah, and I think
but that relationship was doomed from the start. It really was.
Yeah.
Payton didn't want him,
and frankly, even then, I feel like the dagger in the possibility of him even being here was just everything that has become public of that, deferring the injury guarantees to a later date, which, to clarify, the Broncos actually asking him to defer the injury guarantees to a much later date. It actually was saying to them that they wanted Russ to be a part of this team going forward. And Russ said no. And in doing so, because of the fact that he did not say no to restructuring that deal, that's exactly where it is. And of course, there's the possibility of everything that has gone down with this whole threat notion. And if Russell Wilson felt threatened, and with everything that the way that it had gone down, I just can't necessarily see that even being a process or a thought, entering Russ's mind of him even being a Bronco. And so, that's why I just feel like the damage is done. Sadly, it just didn't work out. But I think that the great news is, and why we should be optimistic as Bronco fans, you won 8 games. You won 8 games with Russell Wilson of an above average play, and he played better. Russell Wilson played better, and you won 8 games, and you were scraping and clawing at the barrel of possibly getting into the playoffs. That should actually give us hope as Bronco fans, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
It's 30 and 8.
What's that?
Kate.
No, go ahead.
Saying 30 touchdowns, 8 interceptions is not a bad. We would have taken that a million times over if that was presented to us at the beginning of the year. So it's I'd be shocked if the things were able to be smoothed over. It would make things a lot easier for the Broncos as they decided to move forward.
1,000%.
We shall see, I suppose.
Yeah, the two best possible outcomes out of all of it, in terms of keeping all the options on the table, is Russ does restructure his contract, or you trade him to a certain team and Russ restructures his contract for said team, right? Those are the two possible outcomes, that are the most, perfect situations, if you will, for Russell Wilson.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that a lot of the situation that the Broncos find themselves in with Russ was caused by Russ. I think I'm pretty sure that it was him or his team that released the talk that the team had with Russ about moving his medical guarantee. I'm pretty sure they were the ones that were spinning it in a certain directions, and the Broncos were trying to spin it the other way. It just feels like it was a normal ask, and I feel like they spun it as they're trying to get rid of us because they hate us. You know what I mean?
Actually, it was the injury settlement that got people hung up on it, because it was just the Broncos just wanted to defer it to a later date. And I think maybe Russ and maybe even some people on social media interpreted it as, oh, they just wanted to eliminate the injury guarantee in general. And no, that's not the case at all. Like, the Broncos were just wanting to defer it at a later date.
But to that point, though, it's like, what benefit does Russell Wilson have by deferring it? He's playing a pretty extended period of time unprotected, and he's got to look out for himself at the end of the day, given how violent the sport is.
Mm-hmm.
Any given down could be your last down that you ever play. That's what you sign up for. So I can understand why that wouldn't be good business for Russell Wilson to defer the guarantees. So I'll say the same thing I said right back then when they made this move. Both parties made the best decision possible for themselves. And with Sean Payton going on Radio Row, and then Tom Pelissero, who I saw Joe Rowells, who's a known Broncos Twitter pundit out there, he tweeted that apparently Tom Pelissero is a known George Payton water carrier.
Minneapolis.
So
Broncos, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, do with that information what you will. The Broncos are still holding out hope that Russell Wilson will restructure that deal and defer his injury guarantees. But I think we all know in Broncos country that isn't the reality, and the Broncos' hand will be forced. They will cut him.
Yeah. All right. So a little bit of news outside of quarterbacks, outside of draft and whatnot. We just saw Christian Parker leave to go to the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're wondering if there was a possibility of being able to replace him with anyone close.
Yes.
To be honest, I think this is an upgrade.
Oh,
but just saying. So Jim Leonard is expected to join the Denver Broncos, or has already, I'm not sure, to coach the secondary. So basically replacing Christian Parker. So I have two things. One, what are your thoughts on Jim Leonard? And two, is this a potential Vance Joseph replacement?
Oh, I mean, 1,000%. You nailed it. I mean, like he's a.
Did my question scare you? Did you
No.
think about it for a minute?
Nope. He's a defensive coordinator in waiting. There is no way to, sugarcoat it at all. He has been sought after. He was interviewed by the Philadelphia Eagles, of all teams, too, for a defensive coordinator job last year, along with Vance Joseph. He interviewed for a lot of different head coaching jobs and even defensive coordinator jobs in college. Frankly, if you're being completely honest with me, he should have stayed as the head coach at Wisconsin. But for some reason, things went a little bit sour there with Wisconsin. And they went out and were aggressive, and they hired Luke Fickell. And so in doing so, he went and took a job with Brett Bielema, smart by him, and Bielema in Illinois, because of the Wisconsin ties, to go take a job over with Illinois and be an analyst, which is those small, almost like small roles, if you will, that, college teams do. So I think, and the fact that you bring him in, and a guy who is a very, very aggressive style. I mean, he does, coach as far as some, if you will, man-to-man defense, if you will. I just am super, super excited about it. And I was able to track down an article. It's a great article from Sports Illustrated from Wisconsin, back when he was the interim head coach of Wisconsin, and what to expect from him as a coach. And this is what it said. Leonard is widely regarded as one of the top defensive coordinators in all of college football. While he utilizes a base 3-4 scheme, his defense deploys a variety of fronts with a 2-4-5 design regularly used against pass-heavy teams. Leonard is also known for using an array of stunts and blitz packages to aggressively attack offenses, while leaving his defensive backs in man-to-man coverage, something to at least keep in mind if you're talking a secondary coach. But Leonard uses a lot of movement and misdirection to keep the offenses guessing, regardless of coverage. And so the fact that he's going to be a defensive backs coach, I think, will also help him, because he also played the position. Jim Leonard played the position before, so that'll only help his position and transition a little bit more with the Broncos. And so it helps when you play the position, and it also helps knowing the fact that you also have been with the Denver Broncos a little bit before.
Jim Leonhard has those Denver ties from 2012, so he was part of a damn good Broncos team. Those players will tell you that the 2012 Broncos team was arguably the best one of the Peyton Manning era. So, yeah, man, Jim Leonhard has those Denver ties. I really feel like it's cool bringing him back. I'm less familiar with his college acumen. I don't follow college ball outside of draft scouting, but it seems like the Denver Broncos are, it seems like the Denver Broncos are getting a very, very strong coach who has a very big time acumen with that defensive side of the ball, and in particular, the secondary. I'm really excited and hopeful that he can be an upgrade over Christian Parker, who is a damn good coach. And all the respect to Christian Parker, but I think we got a big time upgrade here.
No.
So 2 more things I want to cover before we end the show, because there's been a lot of info flying around the show today. Randy Gradishar finally makes the Hall of Fame. Woo! He's in. And Demaryius Thomas is on the list for the Hall of Fame.
Put him in right now. Put him in right now.
I want to ask an honest question. Obviously, he is in the Denver Broncos Hall of Fame. Rightfully so. He should be.
He's
but
not.
Has he
will be,
did he do right? But that's what I'm saying. Like, he will be.
Yeah.
Has he done enough to make the Hall of Fame?
You're talking to the wrong person right now.
Listen, that's what I'm saying. Like, I love him to death. He's definitely like top 3 of Broncos ever. But has he done enough to make the Hall of Fame?
Let me first by clarifying a tweet that I sent out, about a week ago when that came out that he's on the ballot. I said he's a Hall of Famer, but I didn't say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I didn't say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer because I think that's exactly who he is. He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think that, and this is also, I think, the unfortunate nature of where we are. I think just is that when a player passes, I think it also makes them appreciate the player and who they are, right? And I think that helps his case just a little bit more. And there was a stretch of games, like there was it's not games, but there was a stretch of seasons that had him as one of, if not the most dominant wide receiver in all of the National Football League, with guys like Julio Jones and Antonio Brown. I mean, Demaryius Thomas was in that stretch as far as like one of the most dominant players. Peyton Manning will even tell you that he was probably the most dominant wide receiver that he has ever played with. And that goes to the likes of Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison. So, I mean, like, and also too, like, I think, and this is the unfortunate thing that's not on his side, is that he didn't get a chance to get to the 10,000 yards. He didn't get a chance to get to the 10,000 yards. So again, do I think that he's a first ballot Hall of Famer? Absolutely not. But I will say though, because like I've been getting a lot of pushback on this because of the whole Rod Smith thing. Rod Smith deserves his light at Canton, not just Demaryius Thomas, but Rod Smith deserves his case to be enshrined in Canton as well. So the moment Rod Smith gets in, which Rod Smith probably does have a much better case than Demaryius, the moment Rod Smith gets in is the moment I would have a very strong conversation of really putting Demaryius Thomas in there.
Agreed. As special as DT was, especially if you think about from 2013 to 2000, or really 2012 to 2016, Demaryius Thomas again was in that conversation for one of the best receivers in the entire National Football League. What he did in that run with Peyton Manning was nothing short of extraordinary. And obviously we're the wrong people to ask because we're all biased. We love Demaryius Thomas, but I don't foresee the Hall of Fame selection committee inducting him as a first ballot Hall of Famer. If somebody like Antonio Gates wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't mean to diss DT. I love DT. He was one of my favorite Broncos growing up. But at the end of the day, man, this selection committee is really damn tough to please. And I hope that we don't have a situation where it takes way too long for someone like DT to get in, or we don't have a situation where with Rod Smith, for example, where he had to wait as long as Randy Gradishar did. But I think that we have a priority list as to who we need to get into the Hall of Fame Broncos wise, and Rod Smith outranks DT for me in that regard.
Yeah. See, and I, big DT fan myself. And I don't want any of this to come across as disrespectful to him at all, because like you guys said, he was dominating. I mean, I cannot get, I cannot love the highlights more. That's one thing. One thing in life that's guaranteed is if there's highlights of the Broncos with Peyton Manning leading the helm, I'm watching those highlights, and I'm watching Demarius catch like just an incredible amount of touchdown passes. That being said, his career is Ring of Fame worthy, but not Hall of Fame. And not even talking, unfortunately, Kim, about first ballot. I'm talking about just at any point. It's going to get harder and harder for someone to get in, especially at the wide receiver position, as some of these older players do start stacking up. And it's going to get really, really tough unless you are one of those first ballot or second ballot Hall of Famers, because we have Torrey Holt, who's not in the Hall of Fame. Like Reggie Wayne is not in the Hall of Fame. And these guys were, just, they really have the numbers and do deserve to have already made it in there. But, it's becoming increasingly more difficult. And I think that that's what Demarius is going to have, is going to be faced with as his candidacy is being heard. That being said, I hope he realized how appreciated he was before he passed, because the love that people have shown since that, he died, and just even his return as a member of the Texans, it was just, the guy holds a very special place in Broncos hearts. But, if we're being honest, I don't foresee him being in Canton outside of anything associated with his some of the big games in his career.
And I was actually just like perusing through, and I don't think it matters necessarily at the end of the day, but if you are providing a case for DT, it's that there are people in the Hall of Fame that are, in terms of receiving yards, that are less than him, but also in that stretch of not achieving 10,000 yards that have made the Hall of Fame before. I'll just kind of go through the list: Drew Pearson, Jackie Smith, Bobby Mitchell, Ozzie Newsome, Don Hudson, Tommy McDonald, Paul Warfield, Cliff Branch, John Stallworth, Fred Biletnikoff, as we know, is the famous one, obviously with the Biletnikoff Award, Harold Carmichael, Raymond Berry. So I mean, like there are at least players that are in there that do not have 10,000 yards. So
those guys were you mentioned a lot of older players that it was a whole different type. I mean, even look at some of the players that in the John Elway era. Like if Elway played today, what would his statistics be versus back then? So it's I know if you have anyone in the last maybe 15 years, it might that was under there. Do you is anyone less than 10,000 yards in the last 15 years?
Actually, yeah. So I mean, like, who knows if Odell Beckham Jr. is going to retire? But Odell Beckham Jr. is at 70. Is at 79. I'm going off of narrative. I'm going off of narrative because people are going on. But Odell Beckham Jr. I mean, there's really not necessarily a whole lot. I mean, I guess the one that's surprising is Brandon Marshall, Hall of Famer.
No.
Linebacker or wide receiver?
We're talking about wide receivers. So
how about Steve Smith Jr.?
Well, the reason why I say Brandon Marshall is because he's got 12,351 receiving yards.
He's not a Hall of Famer.
No, I don't see him.
I love me some B Marsh. Don't get me wrong. That's not a diss on B Marsh, but I don't think he's a Hall of Famer.
Because that's the thing is if Brandon Marshall gets in, then there's a conversation to be had for guys like a Demaryius Thomas, or even appreciating, or even like the Wes Welkers of the world, right? Like the Wes Welkers, possibly the Julian Edelmans of the world. If those guys get in, those are conversation starters, at least to begin with, as far as possibly, Demaryius Thomas even getting in. But again, like I'm agreeing with you guys in the sense of like, no, he is absolutely not even like first ballot Hall of Famer worthy. I wonder, like down the course of the line, will he possibly be looked at, a little bit more? Because like that's just the thing that causes us to look up. And also too, like we have no idea the size of the Hall of Fame class, or like what the Hall of Fame class is actually going to look like too. So I mean, like the Hall of Fame class could be very like down, if you will, and like the names that we actually see on the list, if you will, for a certain year, there's really only say a couple candidates that are deserving, right? And we've seen that actually happen not just in NFL circles, but we've seen that happen in like Major League Baseball in Cooperstown. Like, definitely. I mean, like, yeah, definitely. I mean, like there's been players go from like 0 people in the Hall of Fame to like 1 person going in the Hall of Fame for Cooperstown. So it's certainly possible. It just depends on, I guess, like where would he fit, depending on the year for the Hall of Fame class.
And I hate to put it this way, but I'm going to, because I feel like the Hall of Fame selection process is quite flawed. There are too many non-ball knowers on the Hall of Fame selection committee. I'm sorry. If Antonio Gates is not a first ballot Hall of Famer, I don't know what these people are smoking. I really don't, because there's just this overwhelming sense of media and other members of these committees, like the MVP selection committee being made up of all these media members. I directly remember like Hub Arkush, Bears media member, said that he wasn't going to give Aaron Rodgers an MVP vote because he didn't like him personally. That if we have those kind of flaws that are still tainting like the Hall of Fame selection committee and the MVP voting system and all that stuff, I can't give all that stuff as much credence as we used to give it, because there's just a lot of non-ball knowers out there making these decisions.
Well, and listen, you have Demaryius Thomas getting a walk-off touchdown catch in overtime from Tim Tebow. How does that not put you in the Hall of Fame? You caught a touchdown pass from Tim Tebow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Automatic qualification for getting into the Hall of Fame.
Automatically
Tim Tebow looked like a good quarterback.
I just
who cares what happened the following week? He caught that.
That doesn't matter.
It's just so funny we talk about that every once in a while. But like I think back to that memory, and since we're on the topic of Demaryius Thomas, this is actually a true story. I looked at my dad the moment that happened, given Demaryius, because I was a huge Demaryius Thomas fan even then. I looked at my dad the moment that happened, and I said, wouldn't this be something if that's the play that jumpstarts Demaryius Thomas's stardom? And it's just crazy kind of looking back at it a little bit. So, but yeah, I mean, like, too, like there are way more deserving candidates over the years that could be on that ballot that are going to, I mean, Keenan Allen obviously is in terms of current wide receivers, is a very deserving Hall of Fame candidate. And I'd imagine, I don't know whether first ballot, Mike Evans is another one. I mean, Mike Evans has put up 1,000 yards every single season. And so he is deserving of, first ballot Hall of Fame worthy. So, I mean, there's just going to be possibly and likely more deserving candidates.
I think what works in Mike Evans' favor is he got to play those years with Brady.
And of course he got the championship. Yeah. Which Demaryius Thomas does have.
Yeah. Gage, I want to ask you on Antonio Gates. Do you think that that has to do really with the suspension, the PED suspension, and they're just kind of slapping his wrist and he'll go in next year? Or what?
I'm not going to lie. Him getting a suspension was kind of news to me. That might have been before my day, but I didn't know he even got a PED suspension.
He wasn't born yet.
I wasn't aware of football back then, so that never tainted my memory of Antonio Gates. I remember Antonio Gates as arguably the greatest tight end of that pre-Gronk Kelsey generation.
Oh, no doubt, without question.
But I was gonna say though,
okay,
we'll take the Demaryius Thomas stuff, aside for a second. But I mean, like, if we're talking deserving candidates, at least given the fact that Randy Gradishar now and is finally in there are 3 other candidates that are very deserving be in that Hall of Fame. It's Rod Smith, Carl Mecklenburg, and of course, Mike Shanahan. Mike Shanahan has got to have his due in being in the Hall of Fame, as far as some of those other deserving candidates. And I think that maybe with Gradishar being in there, you would hope. I mean, and we've seen over the years, and Gage touched on it briefly, with the Hall of Fame bias and everything, at least to the Denver Broncos, if you will. I would hope that with Gradishar getting in, you see a little bit more possibilities and some open possibilities of them appreciating the Orange Crush defense a little bit more, because and we said it when Gradishar wasn't in, there were no representatives of the Orange Crush defense in the Hall of Fame at all until Gradishar. So I would at least hope that there is one or two more inductions into the Hall of Fame, so that can at least stand alongside Gradishar.
And it's interesting because Randy, in talking about, it was right after he actually found out when he walked into that room, and that's a really cool video. It's about 6 minutes, but he had Billy Thompson and Tom Jackson waiting for him and a bunch of other people. But I'm not viewing this necessarily as me going in the Hall of Fame. It's really the Orange Crush defense is finally getting recognized after all these years. And he said, hopefully then it will open the doors for some of the other guys on that defense, which was, I mean, you look at the Cowboys, you look at the Steelers from the 70s in that era, and how many, because they won Super Bowls, and there was just such, I see East Coast bias on here too, but there's such, there was such emphasis on winning a Super Bowl in order to become a Hall of Famer. But Tom Jackson was an incredible linebacker. Louis Wright was a shutdown corner.
Dennis Smith
played great well into the 80s. He is a deserving player to be considered. And hopefully, as they were reviewing some of the film of Gradishar, they're seeing some of the other guys that, maybe we need to go back to the drawing board and give them a chance to be heard.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying that too, though. I guess once Pat Bowlen finally got inducted and Terrell Davis, was getting in, and he got his due, I was like, well, surely this is going to be the one that breaks the dam, and the water's going to break, and we're going to get a few Broncos here and there. It's still kind of few and far between still right now.
Yeah. So to kind of bring this whole thing full circle, Randy Gradishar finally gets into the Hall of Fame, and the fact that it took so long,
absolute booty cheeks.
Yes, I got it in there again.
Nice.
Hopefully that does lead to other Orange Crush members getting into the Hall of Fame. I also hope that the ownership for the Broncos, with the money that they have, is able to push some of that through as well. Like that would be very helpful. Anything else that we want to cover before we go?
No, appreciate everybody's comments in the chat and the participation. It's made the show so much fun with all the commentary, and we welcome difference of opinions. So thank you so much for jumping in.
Absolutely. So again, thank you everybody for joining us in the chat. Make sure you check out every other show on the MHRT network. We have shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then when football season starts back up, we'll have the neighborhood on game day, and we'll have Elevation Orange on Monday. So make sure you check that out. I also just put the link for Gage's video breaking down the salary cap in the chat. Make sure you check that out. It's a great video. It runs you through everything just like we did here tonight. So you can kind of make up your minds on what we can do with the salary cap from there. But again,
subscribe to Gage's channel at the same time.
And subscribe to the channel. And same thing with Gage's channels here. The best way you can help is to hit that thumbs up. It takes a micro of a second. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps more than anything. Also, we are growing incredibly fast on TikTok, so make sure you follow us on TikTok as well. All the shorts and the very famous video from Gage,
absolute booty cheeks,
is on TikTok as well, so make sure you go over there and check that out. But we do thank all of you for joining us. We love the Broncos. We love Broncos country. We'll see you guys later. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simpo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out.